The Hives, The Death of Randy Fitzsimmons, album review. Let's chat about it. Hey friends, what's going on? John here from What's Spinning. Here tonight to chat about this latest album from Swedish garage rock band The Hives, a band that I don't really get to talk about much these days because it's been so long since we've heard from them. But for many, many years in my teens, the obsession that I had with The Hives was very, very much a real thing. I mean, they've been a band since the mid-90s. In 1997, they dropped their debut album, Barely Legal, and this thing started off with a bang. This was a fast-paced, gnarly album with everything from garage rock and garage punk, but also nods to hardcore and just straight-up punk rock, but with an abundance of personality that I didn't know that I needed in those genres at the time. And if anything, they only grew with their next few releases. I mean, Very, Very Vicious, when this album came out, it really put them on the map with the huge singles like Hate to Say I Told You So and Made a Fender, as well as classic live favorites like Die All Right. I mean, this band, this album, I should say, showed them take a step back from the sort of gnarly, sort of nastier hardcore side to their music and just go for a straight up garage punk and garage rock sound. But if anything, their personality did not suffer from this. If anything, it grew quite a bit. Now, their follow-up album, Tyrannosaurus Hives, I personally don't think that it gets enough love. I think this album is a little underrated. I mean, yeah, it did show up at the very, very tail end of the garage rock revival movement, but I still think that it has a ton of personality and really fun tracks and some of the better singles the band's ever put out. Now, since then, the band did sour on me a little bit. I mean, I liked the Black and White album when it first came out, and I was a youngin'. I was like 16 when that album came out, and I actually liked a lot of that album. But since then, I've really soured on it, and God, when this album is bad, it is unlistenable. I mean, the band's energy is down. It just sounded like they weren't having nearly as much fun as they were on their early recordings. And the last time we heard from them with Lex Hives, it was even more the case. I was shocked by how straightforward and just plain Jane this album is. Now, this is their first album in quite some time. I was shocked to hear that this album was even coming out. I mean, I've seen them live a few times since the release of their last album. They certainly still have the live show down to a science. But leading up to this album, I was really shocked and impressed to hear just how fresh and fiery these new singles came off. And you know what? This album's a lot of fun. Bogus Operandi as a start to this album, I don't think I could have asked for a better call to arms. This is a huge, huge, huge intro. It is energetic, it is fast-paced, it is explosive. It's gritty, it's got that wild-eyed energy, but most importantly, I haven't heard them have this much fun in the studio since Tyrannosaurus Hives. This is what I needed to hear. This ushers in the sound of this album better than anything else they could have done. This, instantly, hearing this as a single, just honest to God, like, it eased every worry that I had about this album. I feel like a teenager again. They sound great, and Trapdoor Solution is even better. This is gnarly, this is energetic, it's once again super fast-paced. They're playing with some serious energy. This track is a ripper. If you miss that early sound of the band, that Barely Legal sound, give this a shot. This is a no-brainer, and it's a blast. I really love Countdown to Shutdown too. Once again, this is just so obvious. I love the winding riff that we get here and the sort of groove that the Hives lock in on. It's a lot of fun. I mean, I don't know how, but they sound so full of life here. And this is coming from a band that hasn't released an album in almost 10 years. It's got some grit to it. It's got some meat on this riff. And yeah, you can argue that this is a little straightforward. It most certainly is, but that's kind of the name of the game, and I'm not pissed about that. It's very memorable, and Rigor Mortis Radio, it's very different, but it's very good, but for some different reasons. This one is a little bit more subdued, it's kind of sleazy, it's very focused on grooves, and the Hives have certainly done this in the past, but it's always been sort of a hit and miss column for them. But this track right here, it's actually a lot of fun. No, really, the bulky instrumentals and the quirky performances are really hitting the spot. I have a lot of the same feelings on Stick Up. This doesn't have the explosivity of the earlier tracks on this album, but that doesn't take anything away from this track. The band's playing with heart, this track's got a ton of swagger, and they still have that overwhelming sense of personality. Hell, I'd argue that they still have more personality than most bands playing this style. It's bluesy and it's also got some bite to it. Now, there are a few tracks, especially in like the final moments, that get a little clunky. I mean, I wasn't expecting this to be a perfect album. Like Two Kinds of Trouble, for instance. This is an odd one. This is kind of awkward. I mean, on one hand, I do like the rugged riff that we get here, but I feel like the band all of a sudden is trying way too hard. And songwriting-wise, it's not nearly as up to snuff as other tracks on this album. This is the kind of track that I was worried that we'd hear. And with The Bomb, can we all just collectively say this track was phoned in? This easily is one of the most thrown together quickly and haphazardly tracks that we get here. Shockingly so. I mean, the energy is here, the performances are here, but in a sea of tracks that are kind of just pointless fun, which is nothing wrong with that, this sticks out so bad. And what did I ever do to you? God, I find myself asking myself that with this track, because this is easily the worst track here. Once again, a slower, more pensive track from the Hives can be done. They've done it on this album, but it is hit and miss, and this track is straight up ugly. It's a sluggish, electronically tinged, boring track that sounds like it was an absolute bore for the Hives to record. I don't know why this made the cut. Outside of that, though, you may argue that this album is a little late to the party, but I'm just kind of glad that it showed up anyway. Smoke and Mirrors, this track is a rip. It's got that upbeat and explosivity to it that I just love. It's got a really great hook, too. As a matter of fact, I'd go as far as to say this may be the catchiest track here. It's sweaty, it's crunchy, it's youthful, but it also packs a punch. And Crash Into the Weekend may be the most legitimately fun track here, and that's saying something. I love the riff that we get here that just keeps rolling and tumbling along. It's almost got like a cowpunk tinge to it. There are some bluesy elements to this track. It's very straightforward, but it has a ton of personality. And the way the story goes, maybe the quirkiest track here. This track is just plain far out, but in the best way. We get some wonky synths, the riff is really off kilter, and we get some horns in the background too. It's kind of Black Lips-ish. I mean, you know what you're dealing with at this point. This is a very quirky tune, but man, is it a blast. And after a few clunkers, Step Out of the Way is a great finale to this album, and I'm really glad that it is. This is a roaring, snarling garage punk tune with some of the most intense performances on this album. The personalities are on full blast. The energy is turned up to 10. It's just a really great note to leave this album on. So is this album perfect? No. Is it one of the more straightforward rock albums you're going to hear all year? Arguably so, but I would argue right back that the Hives have not played with this energy, passion, and letting some fun get into their music since the days of Tyrannosaurus Hives. They sound loose. They sound like they wanted to record this album. Their energy is up. The songwriting's super catchy. And yeah, there's some really bad clunkers in the final half of this album. Trust me, it gets bad. But for a just straight up fun, zany, really quirky, personality-fueled garage punk album, look no further. I'm feeling a strong 7 on this album, but let me know what you all think down below. If you liked the video, be sure to give us a like, give us a subscribe, and let me know down below what you would like for me to chat about in the future. And until next time, have a great day, friends.